In Night City, big corporations like Arasaka and Militech govern the little people. They are the royalty, the stewards, and the judges of the world that CDPR have created together with Mike Pondsmith. And in Cyberpunk's new Netflix show Edgerunner, we follow David as he recovers from a great loss and follows the likes of Maine and Lucy on a journey that explores what it means to follow a dream and to explore whether those dreams are really ours. This episode will go into spoilers for Cyberpunk 2077 and Cyberpunk Edgerunner, but before we dive into that, Leonard, what were your initial thoughts of the series?
I have to admit, and that also goes back to when you forced me to play the game when it came out, that this dystopian world of Cyberpunk, it's not really my cup of tea. That's also a personal thing. I don't like the hedonistic aspects. I don't like the hyper-violence. I don't like the vomit and piss-covered streets and graffiti-covered walls. But overall, I still enjoyed the show. Because when the aesthetics don't appeal to me, that doesn't mean that it's a bad story. And in general, I enjoyed it.
They're doing interesting things here. They're following a template, definitely. What Arcane did as well, like a good pop song in the beginning, you have the 3-act structure that's very clearly defined. I appreciate it as a writer that they kept it relatively simple and structured. They followed those rules and they just do everything quite well. There's great world building, no over-explanation of the world. There's this moment where you get introduced to mech stack and they don't explain what mech stack is. They don't explain what a gonk or a choom is. Through seeing it, you will either understand it or not. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You will understand a layer of it.
That's right. I understood it all, whilst not being a fan of the genre.
To summarize for people what the 3-act structure is that I'm kind of talking about, there's this call to action due to the loss of his mother. There's this drive-by and his mother dies. And then he's just kind of throwing his life away until he meets Lucy and Maine, and there's the 2nd act. As we said, there's going to be spoilers. He's going to fall in love with Lucy, and Maine is going to die, and it's going to set the vector for his own growth throughout the show. Because Maine goes cyber psycho, and we see this process explained through Maine. He has this running thing that he goes through the desert, and then all of a sudden he realizes he's actually back in real life. And you kind of see that you stop differentiating your dreams or nightmares with real life. That goes into the 3rd act, that's in episode 7. And it's this very clear thing where the show has always been about dreams and mentor figures and following people's others' dream. But it's very clear when you see this scene.
Haven't changed, have you? Still chasing someone else's dream. It's not like I don't understand. Just that things are different now.
So this scene is quite important for the show. And Leonard, you and I spoke about the show on the phone the other day. And you had an interesting insight about how we as human beings follow other people's dream all the time.
Well, we do have this dream of making a living out of writing.
Yeah.
But just in day-to-day life, we just work at an office as marketeers, and we actually make the dreams of our bosses come true. Because they are the ones that started the company. And okay, you work for a bigger company than I do, but the premise is the same. We're corpos.
Well, yes, in a sense. And we all have this kind of feeling that what we do for most of our life, it's something that we once in a while get confronted with. Is this really how I want to spend my life? We hear a lot of stories about someone just becoming another person and transcending. I think that transcending, it's something that David wants to do, but then Lucy makes clear that the thing he wants to transcend into is more fueled by Maine and her dreams than his dreams. And it's also kind of just fueled by what the world wants you to be. And I think that also brings us to the world building.
Yeah, as a world builder myself, I've been pondering about the human aspect of Night City. When you're half grown up, do you lose your grief or your mourning? Is that gone? And those were the things I'm missing, like David's mother died, or Rebecca's brother died, or Maine, or Dorio, or anyone. There hardly is an emotional reaction, and because in this world death is so prevalent, people become desensitized to it, I guess.
I think there's a few things there. David's mom dying, you definitely see the consequences of that on David. He acts in it in aggression, in sadness, like he goes through a few stages. I think Rebecca's brother, definitely there's more anger and comedic relief towards Rebecca than there is actual sadness. But yes, I live in a big city. I live in Berlin, and in Berlin there's a lot of people that are on drugs and alcohol. And if I'm in the morning lying in bed, I can hear my neighbors because buildings are old, the walls are thin, the ceiling is thin. At night, I hear the kids from the family upstairs jumping on the floor, and it's like this loud bouncing noise that I hear. And in the morning, I hear my neighbors fuck each other and fight. And I've had this night where, like, I literally thought that he killed her. That's in your own home. And then when you go out, you're constantly in touch with people. You're constantly sharing your safe space with other people. And that in itself is not the easiest way to live. And you can see that people that live in cities, they're more annoyed than anyone else. Now combine that with a free state America where corporations basically suck the living life out of you. Everyone dies around you. Everyone lost their shame, sitting with flashlights on the street, doing their thing. It's not normal. But there's people that are so twisted by drugs and twisted by alcohol and twisted by the freedom that life gives you, where you have access to everything all of the time, all at once. And some people don't know how to deal with that. And it's the same with Night City. There's another analog. You know, cyberpsychosis is the addiction to chrome. It's the addiction to implants and making you feel powerful. It's an analog for cocaine and for alcohol. And people use cocaine to feel less insecure.
Yeah, and the hyperviolence also makes sense because everyone in the crew is a mass murderer, any way you slice it. They just kill dozens and dozens of people in the blink of an eye without feeling any sort of emotion. You named the drugs, and I've read somewhere that when ISIS was a big thing, when they recorded videos of people cutting heads off, they were also on drugs. And I think you have to be on drugs to commit such heinous crimes. And the same with World War I soldiers addicted to cocaine. And I think, yeah, it makes sense in Night City because everyone is on drugs or chrome or alcohol.
It's following one addiction to the other.
Yeah.
To distract you from being a human being. And that's a nice analog of chrome junkies. They become more and more robots. And one of the people that's interesting in that sense is, I think, Adam Smasher, who more and more, there's a question of, are you still even a human? Do you have a robot shit for brains?
Yeah, it's easy as shit.
Now, to go into the review part, because I really do want to know, what did you think of everything? Now that we've talked about the world building, because you do seem very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, so I have this double feeling, and I thought if I had to give this show a rating, what would it be? Mm-hmm. And I thought probably a 7.5, but then I had this epiphany while recording this. When the story is set up, I thought, okay, what are they building up towards? It wasn't really clear to me, but now I think back, and the very first scene is the cyber psycho, and that's actually what they're telling. The show is actually about someone descending into cyberpsychosis.
Yeah.
And I didn't really make that connection, so I guess I have to up it at one point. So probably 8.5.
That's very generous. Now that you're saying it that way. Yes, they show the end product and then they show the process of how do you become a cyber psycho.
Yeah, putting back the pieces together. Yeah, I think they did it really cleverly.
It's this classic thing that we're all trying to do, is seeing a villain or an antagonist. And well, this is definitely a villain. I mean, the dude that had Sandafistan, he killed police and he murdered a bunch of people. Like, he's the villain. But how did he get there? And that transformation, showing that in such short time, that's also something I quite liked. All these streaming services are asking so much time of you. They all feel like they're so important, so they need the 10 hours to tell a story. And that's great, but there's so many streaming services, and there's only so much time.
Yeah, I think the show could have benefited from 10 more extra minutes per episode, because the thing, and that's why I also took the 1.5 points off, I wanted to see more interpersonal relationships. I wanted to see, okay, David does this all for his mom, but what, maybe put in a flashback, or David and Maine, or David and Rebecca, or Rebecca and her brother, or the character deaths didn't really have an emotional impact to me, or as much as I would have liked.
It had way more potential and the execution could have been even better. Look, David is the avatar for his mother's lost dreams, and then he becomes the avatar for Maine's lost dreams. You would have to know what that person was like and what that person meant to that person. Not like what he meant to the world, but what he meant to David.
Yeah.
You kind of feel it, you kind of get it. You don't have to speak it out or in an expositional way. So I get your point of like 10 minutes wanting to flesh that out a little bit more. I personally really, really loved it, and I feel the whole fulfilling someone else's dream. Look, we as people, we've talked about this in another episode as well. We see ourselves as myths, and we want to make meaning of life, and thus we create stories, and that those become myths, and they stand for archetypes in our life. David is the archetype of wanting to fulfill something, not knowing it's not his own dream, and losing yourself in that. We all have that. Even with the Great Resignation, we feel that our generation definitely comes to the realization, do I really want to do this? And it's even Putin going to war, and so many people following him because he says that there's some big threat, and then all of a sudden you realize that that's not the actual case, and you're actually following someone else's ideals and beliefs, and then you start rethinking those things. It's very human, it's very universal, and that is, even though the world might look very different from your world in this smaller village, you understand parts of it, and that's what's great about it. So the 8.5 rings true for me. Great world building, great characterization. Could have used a little bit more time.
One thing I would like to add is that David is really an interesting character. When writers usually come up for a character for a show, they already have their own dreams and they have their own hardships they have to go through. And David is actually just a blank character, and a lot of people don't want to see it, but probably 90% of the people in the world don't have their own dreams.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to see someone that doesn't have their own dreams or is a hero in his own way. It's
the fact that we get this well-crafted story in the beginning that just works from the beginning because you can't update it. It shows that CDPR is really well equipped to tell very good stories. So I'm very happy to jump back in the game. It's incredible to see the game rejuvenate as well. And it just shows what a good story can do.
Yeah, and it's well deserved because I can see the ambition, I can see the passion of this world they crafted. I'm glad to see people coming back to the game.
Yeah, and also putting back trust in CDPR. They just had poor leadership. They had great people working there. You could see that passion, you could see that love. And that's something to aspire to.
Definitely.
Now, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking it and perhaps even subscribing, as this would greatly help us grow the channel. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next one.